We'll continue our prospect spotlights by highlighting Artyom Levshunov's play on this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be breaking down Artyom Levshunov's play in the NCAA. This is a 6'2" right-handed defenseman with a lot of range, a lot of good skating, and a lot of things we can talk about offensively as well. So we'll get into it, break down the tools, the puck skills. And in our first segment, we'll talk about the habits and overall toolkit in the second segment. And then we'll end things off with an idea of what his projection looks like and what team would be the best fit. But before I get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review. It helps the channel out a lot. And please make us your first listen of the day. So let's get right into it with Levshunov. Talk me through kind of what profile of defenseman we're talking here and where he's projected in the draft as well. Seems pretty high, but he's more or less all over the place. He's 20th on one ranking. Like he's showing up all over the place, right?
He is. He's a fascinating prospect, and he's likely going to go top 5 come draft day. He has entirely the profile that NHL teams adore. This is a 6'2", 198-pound Belarusian right shot defenseman. He's quite old for the draft class, as in late October 05 birthday. But he has been playing some really, really impressive hockey at the NCAA level as a rookie, and one of the younger players in college hockey this year. He's put up 8 goals and 28 points through 30 games, being a real offensive driver for Michigan State University, and has been quite central to that team, really, really impressing so far this season and blowing past all expectations that program had going into this season. And Levshunov has been their most impressive defenseman so far this season, especially in the offensive zone. The defensive play is a lot less consistent, but there are some important building blocks there that I'm sure NHL teams are going to get pretty excited about.
Oh, for sure. And, we're talking about a player who, 2 years ago was playing in U18 hockey. It was playing U18 hockey in Belarus. He did have 63 points in 46 games at that level, but we can't take that we have to take that with a grain of salt because it's a level that doesn't necessarily make you think at a high level. It's very chaotic hockey, which favors the brave, I would say. Having gone back and watched a clip or two of him from that time, it's just as soon as you've got guts, you're scoring. Like it's lanes are wide open for you to just walk right in. But last year played with Green Bay in the USHL, put up 42 points in 62 games and played decent hockey. Set himself up for praise and mention for this year's draft. And now that he's graduated to the NCAA and playing with Michigan State right now, 28 points in 30 games is respectable. He's on a recent dry spell. He's got like 2 points in his last 6 games. But I thought the tools were a bit more flashy in those games, despite the lack of scoring. So yeah, we can start there. How do you rate his playmaking game for starters? I really like his breakout passing, but I really want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, like the breakup passing game is really quite impressive. Like he can really just launch pucks up the ice. There's a lot of power behind his passes, and when he sees an option, he can be really decisive in picking it. Like he will just launch a pass in that direction rather than hold himself back. There's not much hesitation in his breakup passing. The playmaking game is interesting. I really like how many pucks he's able to direct towards the slot in the offensive zone. He's consistently looking to open up lanes and kind of shimmy his body around and try to like implement some delays and use his high end skating ability to create gaps. And yeah, he's consistently getting pucks towards the slot. I think that the dare behind those passes has kind of calibrated a bit more as the season's progressed. Early on this season, I saw him gifting away possession a ton in the offensive zone, trying passes that weren't really worth attempts, even though they were gutsy. At the NCAA level, those types of plays just don't work very often. But as the season's progressed, he's been learning a lot of which passes work, which attempts don't, and he's been implementing that knowledge in his game. So there's been a significant growth or maturation in his playmaking game this season that I've seen so far.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of rating, I'd probably give it a 5.5. Mainly because of the breakup. Sorry, what was that?
Maybe a 6 for me. Like as the season's progressed, I've become a pretty big fan of the playmaking game.
For sure. Yeah, I think the breakout passing is really the standout there, and that's what brings that
Yeah,
rating up. But I'm a bit less sold on what he does in the offensive zone with the puck. I mean, yes, he directs a lot of pucks to the slot, but doesn't really do it with enough manipulation and deception for me to be able
yeah.
to kind of project that as an NHL tool yet. But the breakout passing is fantastic. I think he identifies his outlets really well, and keeps a secondary option in his back pocket if ever something doesn't kind of work out the way he thinks he will. So, yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of the breakout passing overall. But I want to get to the shot because it is a plus tool for me. Like he can put some weight behind it, but it's also fairly accurate both off the wrister and the slapper, right?
For sure, and as the season's gone on, he's been using it a lot more, looking for tips and redirects and going for screens rather than just launching bombs from the point, which I saw a lot last year in the USHL. He was just on shot toggle mode the entire season
Yeah.
and was gifting away possession all the time. And it was one of the reasons that I think I was personally quite lukewarm on Levshunov coming into this season because whenever he had the puck around the blue line, he faced any pressure, he would just launch pucks towards the net, and it just was not working very well.
Yeah.
But this season, he's been a lot more purposeful with those shots, which has also made the power that his shot has a lot more effective because he's actually using it to create some chaos, and it's a lot more controlled and purposeful. So yeah, he's been learning to kind of like rein in his tools a little bit, shedding some of the habits that he learned in Belarusian U18 hockey, and learning to grow into a more professional style of offensive game with the puck.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the habits have grown in terms of a shot, and we'll get into the habits more specifically in our second segment. But really, the shot just in isolation. I really like the weight that he puts on it, and the way that he alternates in terms of just bombing shots and just floating them into areas for his teammates to get on rebounds or pick them up on tips, that kind of thing. So that toggle is really good because there are very few situations this year where I thought, he should have floated that puck instead of bombing it, or he should have bombed that puck instead of floating it. His identification of what shot to use and which scenario is really, really good. So the shot, it gets an easy 6 for me.
Yeah,
It's got
agreed.
enough weight and accuracy, and he's got enough versatility in the shooting arsenal that, especially on the power play, it's been really, really obvious what he's able to do with that. Now the handling. I think the handling, it's really inconsistent with Levshunov. He's really good off the pickup, so when he receives a pass and goes into motion, really interesting. But as soon as it comes to kind of deking through pressure and moving his way through opposition, I feel like the technique is there, but the identification of how to use it is off. Like for me, it's just I'll see him pull out the right deke, but at the wrong moment, or the wrong deke at the right moment. It's just
Yeah.
it's a weird assessment, I would say, for Levshunov, and I definitely need like I've already watched him like 5 or 6 times, and I'm still not really sure where I stand on his handling. What's your thoughts on that though?
I think that so far this season, I've seen like probably like 2 of my 4 viewings. I've been like really noticing that he's overestimating his handling ability and just trying things without really understanding how to leverage his tools to solve that problem. And that's been his one puck skill that has been a consistent question mark in my eyes. Like I think the passing, the playmaking has really, really improved as the season's progressed. So has the shot and like the use of that shot, but the puck skills continue to be really a bit confounding, and the playmaking, the freaking puck handling, all P's, alliteration, just letters. Um, but the puck handling has been really inconsistent this season, and I think a lot of that boils down to his confidence in it, and that varies a lot between games. There are some games where he tries to do very, very little and is very conservative in terms of the situations where he tries to solve with his puck handling. And there are other games where he thinks that he's Connor McDavid and tries to puck handle through pressure, and it just doesn't work very well. And
Yeah.
those are the games where he acts like a fourth forward, where he gets burned consistently, that have me a bit skeptical overall of just how high end the likelihood of him hitting at the NHL level is.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully get that. For me, the handling gets a real baseline five. I think that it's an inconsistent five, or sometimes it's a seven, sometimes it's a three. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot there, and obviously we'll be posting our rating scale and how it works in the description here below. We'll just give you a breakdown. Five is really, think, third pair defenseman, third line forward, that kind of thing, like just NHL, full NHL average. But yeah, I think with Levshunov, it's just if he can work on kind of figuring out more often how and when and in which way to to beat forwards heading up the ice, I would start liking that handling skill a bit more. But right now, what really keeps his rating at a five for me, and not lower than that, is his ability to just go from catching pucks to skating up the ice in one motion. I think that it's really, really fluid the way that he collects pucks, and it's going to help him. I mean, in the NHL, setting up your next play is the most important thing. Like,
Yeah.
before you get the puck, you need to be able to set yourself up for your next play, and Levshunov does that really, really well with his handling skill off receptions. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll talk about his tools more in general, his toolkit, and his habits in our second segment, right after these messages from a new sponsor at Camino Consulting. Our sponsor today is Camino Consulting. How would you like to get to know someone better in an hour than you would in a year? Understanding one another better prevents small misunderstandings from becoming big problems, especially in relationships and family dynamics. After providing more than 20 years of service to small and mid-sized businesses, helping management groups navigate conflict and onboarding new employees, Camino is offering a digital seminar for families and couples. Did your Valentine's Day gift of tickets to the game not go over as well as you've hoped? Well, get the couples and family online seminar for 25% off the month of February by using the discount code locked on. Again, that's discount code locked on for 25% off the rest of the month at Camino Consult at www.caminoconsulting.ca, or mention locked on when reaching out for a business seminar and receive the first 5 profiles free. Alrighty, so moving on to the general tools, how they interact, the toolkit, and the habits of Artyom Levshunov, a projected, I'd say, top five prospect for the 2024 draft. Most of the rankings that are well connected with teams, I'm thinking Bob McKenzie, Craig Button. McKenzie has him at third, Craig Button has him at fourth. Elite prospects have him at fourth as well. So yeah, in terms of the overall interaction between tools, I'd say the skating really kind of highlights more or less everything.
Yeah.
With me, with Levshunov, what's really clear is the edge work's fantastic. He accesses his outside edge really comfortably. He's got a deep, powerful stride, and I really like the way he picks up speed off receptions. So often, what he'll do is he'll do basically lateral crossovers while facing the puck carrier, and present his stick well in order to receive a puck and start moving, right? And that helps him picks up speed and set up his next play really, really well. So I think the fluidity doesn't only show up in his ability to move pucks up the ice, it especially shows up in his gap control, right? Like that for me is a big plus in this game.
His gap control's been very solid this season. I think I'd like to see him be a little bit more aggressive in how he defends the rush specifically, because he has the skating ability to really just close those gaps in an almost Anton Salayev-esque way with about 4 or 5 inches of less reach, which makes a difference, but still.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the skating is the foundation of everything he does, and it is a really strong tool. Like, it's at least a 7 grade in my book, possibly 7.5. Really, really solid skater. And like, he's especially improved on the stride mechanics as the season's gone on. Like the edge work was elite level when, like, back in September, but I remember like seeing that the acceleration be a little bit weaker, and the overall stride power has improved a lot since he's joined the Michigan State program. And clearly, they're doing a lot of strength training there with how he's been working on his lower body strength specifically as the years gone on. And per all accounts, he is one of the hardest workers in the gym and off ice that program's ever seen. So
Yeah.
there's a reason that he's been progressing very, very well this season and working on his tools. But yeah, the skating is foundational to everything he does, and it enables everything else he does. Like, it is really, really core to what makes him valuable on the ice, because he knows how to leverage it to create advantages in most situations. And the ones where he's still learning, there's been progress on this season.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, I mean, like you said, the mindset is definitely a big highlight of his toolkit as well. It allows him to have more room for growth than other prospects. We've seen a big difference between Levshunov at the start of the year versus Levshunov right now.
Yeah.
The recent games that I've watched of his, despite the recent scoring drought, I thought he was better in recent games than he was at the start of the season, where he was over a point per game. And it's mainly because I feel like in recent games he's been focusing a lot more on defending the rush, on defending in zone, and staying a bit more conservative, but in the right way. Like, not taking himself out of position. He's still joining rushes, he's still making passes in transition, and bombing pucks from the point off the rush. But at the same time, he's sitting back when he needs to. There were games I've watched where he was out there at 3-on-3 in overtime and would turn the puck over 4 times in the same shift for like 3 breakaways against Trey Augustine. And if it wasn't for Trey Augustine, Michigan State would have been gone. But now I see a lot less of that. I see a lot more intricacy and composure and poise in this game. Those are big elements of his toolkits now, because a player with this level of skating, with this range and size and gap closing ability, using it a bit more intelligently, a bit more calmly, is a lot better for his game. He's also gotten a lot better with his back turned to the play. When he's retrieving pucks behind his net, when he's receiving grim passes from his teammates, he's not as panicky as he was before. I think that's still a work in progress, and is definitely a subpar element of his game still, but has come a long way. Levshunov was a player I really wasn't sold on. I had basically outside of my top 15 for the first couple of months of the year. And since then he's climbed to ninth, and now he's probably closer to sixth than to ninth in my rankings. So those are big progressions in his game. I really, really like what I've seen recently from him. Um, but yeah, overall, I think that the habits are a thing to work on. Like you said, he's a bit, he's too aggressive offensively, not aggressive enough defensively. Still, but that's kind of trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
But overall, any other concerns with his habits outside of that?
Oof. I mean, it's been an interesting season with him, where there's a lot of concerns that I've had earlier on this season that I don't know if they're still applicable at this stage, because like my last two viewings haven't shown them much. But I've also watched less of him than you have this year. But I think in terms of the habits, like one big thing for me was just his consistent ability to layer his tools together, which early on this season was not always apparent.
Yeah.
But in my more recent viewings has been a lot more consistent. But on that front, how has he been in terms of like that layering and using all of his tools in one more cohesive package? Because earlier on this season, it was like there were sequences where he was just one booming shot, and other sequences where he's just a good skater, and combining everything together and
Yeah.
choosing the right options consistently was a real struggle.
Yeah, and when we refer to rawness, this is basically what we're talking about. A player who hasn't put everything together, hasn't created a cohesive package. That's the definition of a raw player. I think that Levshunov's definitely made strides there, but there are still moments, outside of his puck rushing ability when he's skating up the ice. Outside of that, there are still moments where he thinks, okay, I'm going to do this one thing and then figure out what I do next, instead of kind of layering mentally what he needs to do, right? Um, all the best defensemen in the NHL, they have their second, third, and fourth step already in mind before they even get the puck. They already know that, "Oh, I'm going to get the puck here. I'm going to have to play give and go to get to get open off of this forechecker. And then once I'm in that space, I'm going to make a slot pass. Then I'm going to position myself at the net and then circle back as soon as possible to avoid an offensive rush the other way. I don't see that yet from Levshunov. When he's skating up the ice, I can already tell, like, as he's collecting a puck, he's like, okay, I know what I'm going to do now. So that's a step in the right direction. But once you're talking about the defensive zone and the offensive zone, so everything that doesn't have to do with transitions, there's still a bit more of a linear element to his thought process, and that can change with time. I think that that's something that you develop over time, especially when you're as dedicated and mentally engaged as Levshunov is. It's just a matter of time for me before he develops that. So I'm not too concerned with that element not being there. Um, but it's something that you can pick up over time, and especially once he reaches the pro level, the AHL, the NHL, and works his way up. I feel like Levshunov might cause some doubts at the start of his career, but once he hits 23, 24 years of age, those elements should be in place to make him a really, really good NHL defenseman. But they're actually up for a second segment about tools, toolkit, and habits. Now we'll talk about the projection with Levshunov, what we expect him to be at the NHL level, how many points, and what team would be the best fit after these messages from our sponsors over at Game Time. If you're looking to secure cheap tickets to last minute events, Game Time is the best place to get that done. I use Game Time all the time because my schedule is really volatile and I can find myself with an afternoon free out of nowhere. And they're really useful to secure hockey tickets last minute before an event, sometimes even an hour after it starts. And that's not only for sports; it's also for theater, comedy, basically anything that requires tickets. You can find on Game Time. They're obsessed with saving you money as well. We've got a bunch of deals that help you get the best price for your tickets, and the Game Time guarantee makes sure that you get the best price every time. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. To take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, really simple. Just create an account and use promo code Locked On at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. So check out Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, so moving on to our final segment, we'll be talking about the projection with Artyom Levshunov. We'll also talk about which team would be the best fit, how many points he's likely to get, and what type of defenseman he's going to be at the NHL level. There's a lot of avenues on that side for me. I think we can start there. What can Levshunov develop into, and what would you do as a development specialist for an NHL team who drafts Artyom Levshunov? What direction would you take him in?
I would try to take him into an aggressive two-way mold. I think that would be the thing that would really work with his toolkit the most. I would want to up the ante on the defensive aggression because he shows so much aggressiveness in the offensive zone, and applying that, especially his rush defending, I
Yeah,
think could make him really, really lethal in that facet, especially because of how good of a skater he is, how strong he is, and how long his reach is. Like he has all the tools to be a high-end rush defender, and he thinks the game well enough to do so as well. I think I would also try to rein him in a little bit offensively. He acts like a fourth forward regularly, and that has certainly been decreasing as the season's gone on. And like the trend there is very promising. But I would keep working on that front, and also try to work on the planning, as you mentioned. Like he can be a bit more reactionary in his thought processes,
yeah,
especially in the offensive zone with the puck on his stick. He looks at what's available and he reacts to it rather than having an idea of how to solve a problem creatively and uh, get something out of it that isn't necessarily apparent at first glance. And I think that he has all the tools to be a really high-end two-way defenseman. Like we see the Victor Hedman comp come up like 8 times a year, and it's never really accurate. And I
yeah,
don't think that Levshunov is going to be a Hedman-like player. But in terms of a stylistic goal, I
yeah,
think that Levshunov has the mold and the intelligence and the habits, well, the developing habits, the flashes of habits, and the tools specifically to develop into that like high-end physical two-way defenseman who can play big minutes on both special teams units. There's a lot of refining to do to get into that range. I am not necessarily confident that he can reach that type of ceiling. I mean, not that any defenseman should be expected to hit a Victor Hedman level of ceiling in their
yeah.
draft year, but I think that style of player would do a lot with Levshunov's tools, and I think that that would be a direction that I would be very interested in going.
Absolutely, yeah, and every time I watch him, I always have this thought of in the back of my head of like, I've seen this before, and I keep circling back to David Jiricek and being like, this is something like this
Mhm.
is a big, raw, toolsy defenseman who still has a lot to learn habits wise, but has really great baseline tools, a booming shot, all that stuff. Like we've seen this music before, and I'm sure he's going to be in a better situation than Yurchek's is in Columbus there. But I think over time you can get a lot out of Levshunov that's really really positive. In terms of NHL comparisons, I think of like another Tampa Bay defenseman that I could develop him into, that I would like to develop him into if I was a developing consultant, and it would be Mikhail Sergachev.
Yeah,
I think that style of defenseman, it fits a bit more with what Levshunov does well.
there, yeah,
And Sergachev is another player who he's never been the best decision maker, but he still carved out a great NHL role for himself. Even though, the injury situation is really really unfortunate with Sergachev. I think that he's a player who's overcome his decision making issues really well with solid tools, and I think that a similar projection for Levshunov is likely. What do you think is the offensive ceiling though? Like I see like 45, 50 points as the ceiling, but something like
yeah,
that?
probably 50-ish points. Like I think in terms of high end production, you could maybe get 15 to 18 goals out of him because he is a really good shooter, and
Yeah,
especially if he learns the habit of getting up higher up into the slot before like shooting. If he's actually going for goals,
yeah.
that he can move up from the blue line if he wants to be a goal scoring threat. That would really increase the goal scoring upside with him.
Mhm.
But if he's developed as like a Sergachev style defenseman, I could see a 60-point upside. Where if he has like a really rock solid, high intelligence defensive defenseman to play with, then I think that you unlock a bit higher on the offensive side, and you
Yeah,
allow him to take those risks if you trust the player to his pairing mate to kind of sweep up everything else that happens as a result. But if he's developed more as a two-way style, I think 45 points would be like the likely like upside range in his prime.
for sure. And yeah, which team do you think would be the best fit? I'm looking at some teams here that really need some right-handed defensemen. I'm thinking Buffalo, Ottawa would be in this conversation, right? I think those are the two kind of main suspects in terms of
San
destinations
Jose?
for. San Jose would also be a great option. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm looking at
yeah,
the decor. Matthias Havelid, that's I mean, Shakir Muhammadulin, but I mean, I don't think either of us are real big fans of Muhammadulin.
yeah. Jake
Even though,
Furlong's good in a depth role.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, you're talking about a sweeper, a player who, a defenseman who can play with him and make him make his offensive dare shine a bit more, make him a bit more confident going up the ice. I think Jake
Yeah.
Furlong would be a great partner for Artyom Levshunov, but I'm also thinking of Jake Sanderson in Ottawa, like long term, if they
Yes.
can they can make
That
those
would
two
be an
work together.
exceptional fit.
It,
Stylistically speaking,
yeah,
Sanderson Levshunov is beautiful. Yeah.
absolutely magnificent, and also in Buffalo. I mean, you have Darlene, you have Owen Power, you have
Not bad players.
was it Matthias Samuelson? I think that's his name.
Matthias
Matthias.
Samuelsson.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think Samuelson of the three is probably the best fit next to Levshunov, but I could very well see a Power Levshunov pairing be just absolutely dangerous on a
Chaotic as
second pair.
anything.
Chaotic for sure, but really, really fun to watch on a second pair. I don't think Levshunov's, unless something goes really, really well, I don't think Levshunov's going to be a bona fide top pair defenseman. I don't think he's going to, I mean, at the very best, he's going to be like a number two, like a weak number two. And if you can have that next to Rasmus Dahlin, sure, but I wouldn't hedge my bets on that. I'm a lot more confident with Levshunov as the best player on a second pair. You know, so having a power Levshunov second pair, I think would fit really, really well together. But I think of the three teams you mentioned, I think Ottawa's the best fit, mainly because of Jake Sanderson. Like
Yeah.
Sanderson is your bona fide number one. If you can have Levshunov on his right, playing in a bit of a more muted role, playing a bit more of that two-way game, and then you have Thomas Chabot on your second pair as your pure offensive guy. I think
Yeah.
that's a big three that works really, really well in Ottawa, right?
For sure. Like I think Ottawa, at least from what I've seen from them this season so far, the forward core is a lot of fun. The defensive core is a lot weaker than what it looks like it should be on paper. Like they have
Yeah.
some really, really good players in there. Like I know Thomas Chabot has his fair share of fans and detractors out there in the Ottawa fan base. But I mean Sanderson and Chikrin are both really solid defensemen. We'll see if Chikrin sticks around in Ottawa or not.
Mhm.
At the moment, it's not looking all that promising on that front. But I think if you throw in Levshunov into that mix, you're going to have a far more intriguing defensive core. And while he might not necessarily fix all the defensive warts of that team, he will add a lot of skill on the defensive side of things. And
Mhm.
especially because they already have Artyom Zub, for instance, who is a high-end shut-down right shot defensive defenseman. To have the other right shot defenseman in that lineup be a bit more offensive leaning, I think makes sense.
Absolutely. And that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect spotlights for the 2024 NHL Draft. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.